Hello friends, welcome to the fourth session of Raj Economics Club presents Raj Economics Festival. So this is the separate recording, which is we couldn't actually complete the workshop due to the technical difficulties that was faced by the resource person we had, Lukas. So here Lukas is having the second portion along with a brief summary of the first portion in the workshop. Hope you can enjoy this video where we completely explain the second portion which we couldn't host during the first section. And this is the last workshop from the Raj Economics Festival. Thank you all for cooperating with all the four sessions. We'll soon have the pluralism quiz, pluralism economics quiz, which is part of the Raj Economics Festival, which will be grades and the prizes will be announced sooner. So keep waiting for that. Thank you.
In the first part of this workshop, we've learned about we've learned about each other's expectations from studying economics, and we talked about why the current economics education fails to fulfill those. So we talked about what's wrong with our current economics education and how we can actually make it better. We discussed how the overwhelming focus in current economics on abstraction and mathematical modeling is a real issue. That's because trying to navigate economic systems and solving economic issues based solely on simplified models is like trying to drive a car, but only looking at a map in your navigation system instead of looking through the windshield at what's really going outside in the real world. What's missing in present day economics is teaching concrete knowledge about actual economies. Economics education needs more teaching on students' own economies, the economies they live in and surround them. It needs more teaching about the history of those economies, about how they're governed, about their main economic sectors and industries, and about the most important challenges that they're facing these days. Economics can be changed to include more of this real world knowledge. For example, by starting from real life issues like poverty or development, to teach about both the issues and theoretical ideas about them. And that's something that's already being done by world-leading institutions like the London School of Economics in their introductory course, for example. So it is possible, and it is already being done. So why not do it everywhere? Learning more about how real-world economic systems work can be incredibly powerful. That's also something we learned in the first part. And we heard about the example of a member of the European Parliament that showed how powerful this kind of real-world knowledge can be. Because this member of the European Parliament had this extensive sectoral knowledge, he was able to design and push through a regulation on the energy efficiency of vacuum cleaners. What seemed like a very small thing led to energy savings and emission reductions equivalent to the annual energy consumption of all Belgian households combined. So the bottom line of the first part was we need to and want to improve economics education by including more teaching on the real world instead of only teaching abstract theories and maths. In the second part, we want to talk about what you yourself can do to work for change at your own universities and what support and resources exist out there to help you do so successfully. Trying to work on change and trying to change your own economics education can be incredibly frustrating, and it can feel very lonely at times. My colleague Jamie, whom we had already met before in the first part of the workshop, he felt exactly like that when he was trying to work on changing his own studies. He felt frustrated and lonely. As I mentioned, He studied economics at the University of Exeter in the United Kingdom. His motivation to study economics did not so much come from wanting to tackle real world problems. For him, that motivation only came a few years later. What he was most interested in was the math. He was good at math in school, but found the idea of studying math alone just too boring. But in economics, he could study econometrics and he was intrigued by the mathematical modeling. So he decided to go for economics. In his classes, he fairly quickly understood the maths behind the models. That wasn't a problem. However, quite early on, he realized that what the model said about the real world in substantive terms didn't make much sense. For example, in his second year macro course, one of the models he learned was saying that both wages and profits go back to workers. But how often does it really happen that workers get both a salary and a share of the company's profits? Not very often, at least it's not the standard. Becoming increasingly frustrated with such unrealistic assumptions, Jamie went to his professors to ask why they were learning this kind of stuff. But the answers he got were really unsatisfying. He always heard something along the lines of, it will get better and closer to reality later, and this is just to teach you the maths. Essentially, he was told to just go along with it and be patient. And he felt like he lacked the knowledge and he found it difficult to actually argue against such statements that were saying it's going to get more realistic later. Another professor he also talked to gave him a math textbook to read in his own time, but he didn't even open it once because the problem for him was not that the math was too easy, but that he wasn't allowed to think for himself and that the models that they were being taught were completely detached from reality. Eventually, he got so frustrated in a micro lecture that he just walked out halfway through and he didn't come back for the rest of the term. Instead, he decided to take matters into his own hands. If his professors wouldn't teach him things that really mattered and would really allow him to understand the real world economy, he would simply teach himself and others. So he started gathering some of his fellow students who were also unhappy and started organizing events and discussion sessions. For example, he organized evenings with discussions on more real world focused topics with quite high participation rates of sometimes 20 to 30 students. And he also organized sessions that were where they would take on some of the models from their classes and dissect and criticize them. These more nerdy sessions were frequented by fewer people though. But what this example shows is that you don't have to resign to your frustration with economics. One thing you can do is to start learning about alternative economics by yourself and together with others by organizing discussion sessions and alternative lectures, or by reading and studying alternative economics by yourself. And the great news is that there are amazing resources out there which can help you to do so. And one of them is Exploring Economics. Exploring Economics is an open access and bottom up e-learning platform for everyone who wants to go beyond the one-sided, monolithic economic mainstream and who wants to learn about all the other tools and perspectives that are out there that can help economists understand the real world and economic problems in their whole diversity and complexity. Now back to Jamie. The self-learning that he initiated and did together with other students was great and fun and all, but he saw that not very many of his classmates were actually as unhappy as he was, or at least it didn't concern them as much. Most people were just busy with keeping up so that they could get their degree and a job afterwards. And it was, of course, also time consuming to organize all the self-learning on the site just by himself. When he finally had the guts to try and talk to some of his faculty more strategically about making actual changes to their curriculum, he learned that there were a lot of constraints to change in the curriculum, and lobbying for changes just by himself was difficult. He felt lonely and powerless. After graduating and working at the Bank of England for a year, though, he went on to study at the University of Bocconi in Milan. This time, he wanted to do not only economics and definitely also not only mainstream economics, so he went for a master's in economics and social sciences. But again, his classes were too much about abstract maths. And again, he felt frustrated. Only in one course, competition law, did they actually look at real markets, and he wanted more of that. So he decided to work on changing that. But this time, because he had experienced how lonely and ineffective it can be to try to make change just by yourself, he decided to do things differently. In the second year, he and others set up a Rethinking Economics group at Bocconi. Most of you probably know Rethinking Economics is a global movement of students and recent graduates who work on improving economics education. They work on making economics education more pluralist, realistic, and diverse and decolonized. It's all about connecting with people at your own university and all around the world who also want to change economics. It's about training yourselves and others as leaders and campaigners for curriculum change. And very importantly, it's not just about working together, it's about having a community of like minded people and having a lot of fun with those people. All of these pictures here are from the 2022 International Gathering of Rethinking Economics in Paris this summer. I was lucky to have been able to go there, and I can tell you it's a unique experience to connect with all those lovely people that have traveled there from all continents of the world. A fun fact, Jamie, my colleague and friend, found the love of his life at one of those gatherings before the pandemic, and they actually just got married. And also at Bocconi, Jamie found community, a community of like-minded people who also wanted to change economics at the university. So they organized lots of activities to organize themselves and learn about alternative economics together, like discussion events and speaker talks. And they developed and ran a training for their fellow students on how to talk to your professors about changing their courses. But it was hard to make actual change. He tried hard, but Jamie struggled to convince others to go talk to their professors because nobody felt comfortable enough to do so. Also, the head of department at Bocconi was completely against changing things. It was difficult to convince him because they were lacking a concrete alternative vision of how a different economics education could look like. And they were simply lacking the time to come up with a detailed proposal for new courses, less so an entire new curriculum for the degree. And what was frustrating as well was the high fluctuation of people who got involved, but then finished their degrees and would leave again. Not many alumni took on responsibility afterwards and stayed involved to work on fixing economics education, even though they themselves would not benefit from it anymore. Eventually, Jamie came across the Economy Studies project. These two guys here on the right, Sam and Joris, they founded, they used to be active in rethinking economics in the Netherlands. In fact, Joris, the guy on the very right, he founded Rethinking Netherlands in 2014. And for several years, they were actively campaigning for change at their universities and built and organized rethinking economics in their country. However, at some point, they realized that what they were doing was simply not enough. They were mostly organizing and criticizing current economics education. Just like what Jamie realized in conversation with his head of department, they realized that a concrete alternative proposal to the status quo was missing. So they decided to just create one. They decided to create a concrete alternative proposal. They got dozens of other rethinkers involved, reached out to professors to collect their ideas, and started to work on developing a new concrete vision for an alternative economics education. And in November last year, they published their book called Economy Studies, A Guide to Rethinking Economics Education. And the book's purpose is to provide precisely what was missing, a new concrete vision for how a more real-world focused, pluralistic, and critical economics education could look like. And they designed it not as an alternative textbook, but as a very practical guide with lots of tools and instruments for implementing their ideas and working on concrete change on the ground. And as of this year, we're a whole team, and that whole team is here to support you with your curriculum change projects. Together, we will co-create the concrete ideas and proposals that you need to convince your professors to introduce a new course or to make over your entire syllabus based on the economy studies book. We give your teachers the teaching materials like PowerPoint slides and exercises, which they need to teach a new course. We provide you with the continuous support that's oftentimes difficult to achieve when recent graduates stop being involved. And we sit down with you to develop your change projects from the start. We make a strategy together and see it through with you from beginning to end. And we help you go talk to your teachers, or we go talk to them ourselves together with you, whatever you feel comfortable with. So with these three elements, learn, organize, and co-create, we believe we can make change happen together. So we've come a long way in this workshop. We started by getting to know each other and hearing about each other's motivations to study economics. We've learned about what's wrong with our current economics education, why it's not a good idea and frustrating to drive a car looking only at a map. We've talked about how it can be done better by incorporating more real-world knowledge about your own economy, about actual issues, and also about economic history into economics programs. And in the example of Bas Eickhout, the member of the European Parliament, and his vacuum cleaner regulation, we've seen how powerful such knowledge can be when it's used to tackle real-world problems like climate change. And we've shared with each other how we feel about trying to make changes ourselves. We've discussed how to make sure we know enough to convince others, especially our faculty, how to make sure we're not alone and work for change together as part of an international community like Rethinking Economics. We learned how to make sure to get support from us at the Center of Economy Studies and co-create your new courses together with us. We help you with your change projects and accompany you along the way. You're not helpless and you're not alone. There are loads of resources out there to equip you with the knowledge and tools you need to make change. There's a whole community of thousands of students out there spread around the world who work for the same goal, changing economics. And there are people like us who are full-time professionals ready to help you make change at your universities. Now, if at home we're not live anymore, but if at home you would like to follow me with this exercise, let's end this workshop with making some commitments to ourselves. If you are convinced that something needs to change, I want you to make a commitment to yourself to do something about it and act. Obviously, this is nothing that anyone else is going to hold you accountable for. You are the only one who's going to hold you accountable. It's a commitment only between you and yourself. So I invite you to take a piece of paper or your notebook and answer the following questions. Which two concrete steps will I take tomorrow to start changing economics at my university? And secondly, which three people will I tell about this workshop who could be allies for change? Normally, had this last part of the workshop been live, you would have had 5 minutes to think about these questions and write them down. Since we're not live anymore, I invite you to take these questions with you and simply fill them out for yourselves. Thank you very much. Please contact us, get in touch at lukas.salecker@ourneweconomy.nl if you want to make change with us together. Thank you very much.